We have found levels of E. coli in the water way and above and beyond what were really at deadly levels, levels that could actually seriously make someone very, very ill.
16,000 households and businesses in Brixham in Devon have been warned to boil their tap water after a parasite called cryptosporidium was found in a nearby reservoir. Now, at least 46 people have been diagnosed with the disease, and health authorities are investigating at least 70 more cases of diarrhoea and vomiting, with cases expected to rise. Well, joining me now is Charles Watson, founder of River Action UK. Charles, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Charles, your reaction to what we're seeing happening in Devon. Some people have said it's a wonder we haven't seen this happen before and more often.
Well, the fact is, it is happening every day of the week all over the country. I mean, nothing as systematic of what we've seen in Brixham, where an entire town has effectively had its water supply shut down. But people are getting ill every day. And, for example, we've been doing very recently some whole systematic testing up and down the lower stretches of the River Thames, where we have found levels of E. coli in the water way and above and beyond what were really at deadly levels, levels that could actually seriously make someone very, very ill. And since we published this, which was at the time in the Oxford and Cambridge boat race, we have been inundated with people, incoming emails, just people just sending stories into us of a lot of it being kids. There's a lot of along the Thames. You have lots of schools where rowing is part of understandably, rowing is part of the sports curriculum. Just hundreds and hundreds of people are getting ill. Hundreds. I mean, we've heard stories of people's pets dying, dogs that go swimming in this water, all over the country. We have been. I mean, we have to remember that we've just had figures released by the Environment Agency a few weeks ago that showed that last year we had almost 500,000 individual spills of sewage into our rivers, which was up 50% on the previous year, over 50%. That's over 3.5 million hours of sewage. That's about 1,000 times a day raw sewage being discharged into our waters. And so sorry, that was a long answer to your question. No, absolutely no surprise at all. And this big incident is it's just been an accident waiting to happen. And I'm afraid we're going to see more and more of this as time goes on.
Charles, how do we fix this? A lot of people are saying, look, the privatisation didn't work, but that's looking backwards. How do we look forwards? How do we get to a point where we can actually start using our rivers again? I've talked about this on the show before. I quite enjoy having a swim in a river, paddleboarding. I haven't done it for the last 3 years because I'm actually too scared of going or falling into the water. So how do we get to a point where our waterways are safe to be used?
Well, then in which case, I mean, that's obviously a hugely complex question. But let's go to look at the source of the problem. The source of the problem is, for the best part of the last 30 years since privatisation, our infrastructure to both provide us with fresh drinking water and to remove our bodily waste has not been sufficiently invested in. So, and if you take certain parts of the country, we've seen population growth in excess of 30%. We've seen economic growth, and we've got to remember businesses and other commercial activities use water, in large quantities as well. So we've seen huge growth in demand on a system that has not been invested in. I mean, take drinking water. We have not had a single, despite 30% increase in population, we have not had a single reservoir built. A new reservoir built since privatisation. So that's the first stress coming onto the system. The second stress coming onto the system, as we all know, the weather's gone crazy. I mean, we're now seeing multiple named storms a year, and obviously when there's floods, and when that is a hydraulic event, an extreme hydraulic event. So that is putting stress on the system as well. And the problem is the system was not invested in, A, to meet its daily demands, and B, to meet these increased stresses that are coming onto it. So the only solution is there has to be a huge infrastructure investment program to bring this failing system. We're losing, some water companies lose up to 30% of their of the fresh drinking water. It just gets lost through broken pipes. Of those sewage discharges figures I gave you, I mean, some of them are due to the extreme weather when the system gets overwhelmed and the stuff pours out. But 30% of that was what is described, the technical term is infiltration. That means broken pipes. That is where pipes just haven't been inspected. They haven't been maintained. And the reality is this industry has not been run to provide an essential public service. It has been run to make profits for its investors. And there now has to be, there's no choice, there has to be a transfer of value. I'm not advocating renationalization, but you cannot see so much of this is a monopoly industry. You can't see so much of the cash flow of that industry being taken away and paid out to shareholders. It's got to be reinvested in the system.
Charles, on a side note, alongside that, do we also need tougher regulation? Do we need an environment agency with teeth, perhaps, whether it's the Environment Agency, whether it's Ofwat? But it feels like for the public, certainly the people I've been speaking to, that the water companies have too much power. They're not afraid of a regulator, and they should be.
I know. Well, absolutely. That was going to be the second half of the next part of my answer to your first question. That is the second thing that has happened is whilst all these stresses and strains being put on the system and all the money's been taken away by shareholders, the people who should have stopped that happening have effectively been missing in action. So let's first look at Ofwat. Ofwat's job is to protect the customer and to regulate these companies financially. So Ofwat has failed to stop these huge levels of debt being accumulated within the water companies. It's failed to stop these huge levels of dividends being paid out. And therefore Ofwat has now got to absolutely screw down on these companies to make sure that the vast majority of their financial capability goes to invest in the system. Now, the Environment Agency, their job, that's the other regulator. The Environment Agency's job is to obviously, as it says on the packet, to protect the environment. And this to me is what the statistic I'm about to describe. To me, it says it all. So last year, 1.4 billion pounds were taken out of this industry in dividends. Now, what was the fines? The fines that were imposed on the water companies for all these multiple acts of systemic illegal activity, like the ones we've seen this week, and the ones that the people of Brixham are having to deal with this minute. The fines imposed on this industry were the grand total of 11.4 million. So the ratio of fines to dividends is about 1%. So this is an industry that can distribute all this money to its shareholders in the knowledge it's going to have to give away 1p in the pound to make up for its misdemeanors. Now, that is not a deterrent. That's an incentive to pollute. Fines, there should be a penalty regime on these companies where if you do something like you poison the people of Brixham, I mean, you know, this South West Water should not be paying any dividends until it can reassure the regulators that an incident like this could never happen again.
Okay.
Take for example Lake Windermere. This week, Lake Windermere, millions. It was revealed that millions of litres of raw sewage was accidentally released by United Utilities into the middle of the most iconic lake in this country. And guess what happened the next day? They announced that they were increasing dividends by 10% to almost 400 million distributed to shareholders. That is what has got to be stopped, and our regulators have got to get some teeth and get a grip on it.